Oh.
That looked like it hurt. Welcome back, true believers and spectacular Spidey fans, to another infectious installment of Radioactive Review, the series in which I fully review each individual Spider-Man game in which I completed my Radioactive replay for. And in this video, of course, we are going to review what is considered to be the worst Spider-Man game of all time, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, if you guys have not seen any other Radioactive reviews before, just look in the description and you'll see all the other reviews for each Spider-Man game that I have done. So I've done one for Web of Shadows, Shattered Dimensions, Edge of Time, Spider-Man 3, and The Amazing Spider-Man 1. And since this is, in fact, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I highly recommend that you watch The Amazing Spider-Man 1's review first, and then come back and see this game's review, because since this game is a sequel, there's a lot of features from the first game that are in this game, and a lot of points that I brought up in that video are going to be brought up again in this one. So just a heads up. Now, before we begin, everybody, I have to give a huge shout out to Ricky Franklin over on Twitter. He made this incredibly awesome custom-made Radioactive replay logo himself. I didn't even ask him to do this. He just did this out of the kindness of his heart. It is truly incredible, and you see me use these in all the other Radioactive replays that I've done so far, and definitely I've used them all in The Amazing Spider-Man 2's Radioactive replay. It is straight up gorgeous. Ricky, thank you so much for making this. You are incredibly awesome, and please go follow him over on Twitter. It will definitely mean the world to him as well as to me. And before we continue, everybody, I have to bring up the awesome milestone that I am lucky enough to be able to have reached, is that my channel has now gained over 10,000 subscribers, which is absolutely insane. All of you giving me the support that you give me on Twitter and on YouTube day in and day out means the entire world to me. I'd be nothing without you guys. All of you giving me the support that makes me who I am today and making me the YouTuber who I am today just means the entire world to me. And definitely expect a really long 10,000 subscribers special video, which will be coming out either tomorrow or the day afterwards, and I'll be answering a lot of your questions that you asked me on Twitter. It's going to be a really interesting video. It's going to be like a big Q&A about Spider-Man PS4 or other stuff in regards to Marvel Comics or anything else that I'm interested in. And on Twitter, you guys asked a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and answer all of them, and they are just flat out awesome. All you guys are awesome, and thank you so much. And just a heads up before we get into the main review, everybody, is that this review may have some special guests from the one and only Bulworth Academy. You may be hearing quite a few funny voices in regards to people who were in that game being in this video just for fun, because this game, since it is considered to be the worst Spider-Man game of all time, I want to make it more funny and more lighthearted, so that way you guys can have your spirits be raised, and also so you can just have a more fun time when watching this. So once again, if you guys have no idea how Radioactive Review works, basically I fully break down each individual Spider-Man game after I beat them head to toe. So I go after the story, I go after the graphics, and I go after the soundtrack, which is something that I'm actually very admirable towards in video games. It's actually the game's soundtrack. I go over the cons, the pros, the best moments, and the worst moments, and then give it my final score. Now, keep in mind, this game was heavily rushed by Activision when this game was coming out. It had less time to be developed than the first Amazing Spider-Man game did, and since it is a movie tie-in game, they obviously had a lesser budget than what they did with Shattered Dimensions or Edge of Time or even the first Amazing Spider-Man game. But yeah, definitely just keep that in mind when we are talking about this game, is that Activision kind of screwed over Beanox. It's not Beanox's fault, but sadly, Activision did decide that it was okay to just release this game, and what we got, the final product, didn't really exceed a lot of everyone's expectations and standards to what the quality of a Spider-Man game should be. But still, if you like the game, more power to you. So let's start off with the story. So since this is a movie tie-in game, usually how that goes is that the movie tie-in game should follow at least some aspects of the movie, just like Spider-Man 3, the video game, did in a actually pretty good way. This game, however, is in a really interesting pickle. So, the Amazing Spider-Man 1 game was an epilogue to the Amazing Spider-Man 1 movie, and the epilogue had absolutely nothing to do with the main movie, because Beanox had free range to create whatever story they wanted for the epilogue of the Amazing Spider-Man 1 movie. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a sequel of the game's story, which means it doesn't really focus that much within the first movie's boundaries or even the second movie's boundaries because of how the first game set up this really unique story with cross-species monsters and Gwen Stacy and everyone else at Oscorp getting infected. This, however, it's really, really strange. So basically, we have Uncle Ben's killer, who Peter is still trying to find, and Peter has not apprehended yet, is still roaming around New York City, and Peter is trying to go and stop him. Then, spoilers, he actually gets killed by someone called the Carnage Killer. And then throughout the main story of the game after that is that Peter is getting trained by Kraven the Hunter to try and track down the Carnage Killer and other thugs that are, related to him or in cahoots with him of some sort. And also we have lots of side story aspects with the main movie part of Electro and Green Goblin, and also more continuations with the story of the first game with Black Cat. I honestly have no idea how to really describe this story. It's all over the place. It's just a jangled mess of plots from the movie and the past game and a couple of things from the comics, but not that much. But yeah, this story is definitely below average. Next up is the graphics. So this game technically is a next generation game because of how it released on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One in 2014. However, it was primarily developed on the last gen consoles of the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Still, since this game did come out on next gen consoles at the time, we have to look at what the best graphics were on the consoles, which was on the PlayStation 4. And I have to say, I keep going back and forth. I have no idea if this game looks better or worse than the first game. The first game looked really, really nice. This game, it looks nice sometimes, specifically during the sunset time or even during the nighttime, but mainly during the day. The colors are kind of too bright at points, especially with Spider-Man's suit. It looks like the suit is either too dark of a red and too bright of a blue, and also just the graphics in regards to how the character models are. Yeah, I'm gonna let Trent from Bulworth Academy take this one from Peter Parker. Trent?
Look who got hit with the ugly stick!
Nothing but tough love from our boy Trent. So basically, the graphics in this game, I would say, are worse than the first game, given what the first game had to deal with on last-gen consoles, and given how this is the same situation but a lower budget on what the game had from Activision last time. I would have to say that they didn't really do a good job of trying to build off the graphics, and they instead just kind of downgraded them a bit. They're not terrible, but they're not that good either. Next up is the soundtrack, which is something that I highly admire within video games, is actually the game's soundtrack. And as you would expect, this game's soundtrack is very dull and very boring because of how each soundtrack from each level or each mission that you do in the game is extremely repetitive. Nothing stands out. It's all simple and plain and boring. The only theme that sticks out to me with the game's soundtrack is actually Carnage's theme, which you are hearing in the background music right now. That is the only good thing about this game's soundtrack. Other than that, everything that you do in the city or when you're fighting bosses, the soundtrack is just flat, dull, and doesn't excite me at all. Next up, I want to talk about the pros, everybody, but sadly, of course, the cons do outweigh the pros, but still, I think if I talk about the pros first, it'll make sense when I talk about the cons. So the first pro that I have is that the game does in fact have a difficulty setting. Even though this is a small one, I still personally do like it when games have difficulty settings. However, when you switch between hard, normal, and easy, the shift doesn't feel that extreme. It still feels genuinely average in terms of difficulty, but still the setting option still is a very nice touch that they added within the game. The second pro that I have is actually where Spider-Man uses his spider sense in specific areas in the game. Now, while this is just a small little feature that isn't really that significant at all, it's still different from that of the first game, and it's an extremely cinematic point of view where you are Spider-Man. You have to use your spider sense in certain areas that will allow you to try and dodge enemies' attacks or things that are trying to hurt you in a very cool looking way to try and represent that of the movie, which I found extremely cool when I first played the game, and actually replaying it I do really appreciate, and that's just a really nice detail that Beanox added within this game. The third pro that I have is actually the improved stealth and traversal. So of course from the first game, the stealth was extremely repetitive and didn't require any strategy. This game, it still doesn't require any strategy. However, they did extremely improve the animations as well as how you can take out guys in stealthy ways. You can do it from walls, you can hang upside down, you can do it directly behind them or really far away from them, and also depending on which suit you are wearing, that actually allows you to get a bigger reach from when you are doing stealth takedowns, which is very helpful when playing the game. And as for the traversal, we have more methods of swinging with a slingshot boost, boosting your swings in general, and also web rush is more improved now when trying to get around town. It's more helpful. You can do more things when you're actually trying to fight bad guys as well, but when traversing around, it is very useful in different areas of the game. Now, the second to last pro that I have, everybody, is actually Peter Parker gameplay. Now, there are sections in the game where you can actually play as Peter Parker. You can talk to people as Peter Parker, or do specific missions only as Peter Parker, which is actually pretty interesting. However, they are linear sections of Peter Parker gameplay, still with what Beanox had to work with, where you can specifically walk around this fundraiser as Peter Parker talking to the Kingpin. That one's actually quite interesting, which is the second point I want to bring up as the final part of this pro, is that there are dialogue trees where you can talk to people that Peter Parker or Spider-Man may know, and you can try and get information out of them. You can do this either as Peter Parker or Spider-Man. It does feel like only an extension of the cutscene. Still, you can skip it completely if you want, but I still find it actually quite entertaining when you do activate these dialogue choices. Same thing goes with the Peter Parker gameplay. When you do play as Peter, it's a nice break from what you would usually do as Spider-Man, swinging around the city fighting bad guys, and when you're Peter Parker, you can talk to people, get information out of them, and investigate more of the story, which I do like that they put in this game. Now, with all the pros out of the way, I want to get into the main best moment of the game, and there is only one best moment of the game, which is in fact Stan Lee's comic book shop, where you can go in, you can talk to Stan Lee, you can look at all the collectibles that you have obtained through playing the game with collectible statues, comic books that you can actually read, you can look at concept art of the game, and you can also do arcade challenges. Now, sadly, there are only 12 arcade challenges, and it's not like the Arkham games where there's tons of challenges that you can do to get different scores. Mainly, you play these 12 specific challenges, and then you get the Superior Spider-Man suit. Still, it is kind of fun if you just want to just plainly beat up bad guys and don't worry about the hero or menace system, which we will get into later. But the challenges are very fun, entertaining, and short.
Haha! Dingus!
Did I say fun, entertaining, and short? I mean extremely repetitive and dull.
Want me to get the nurse?
But in all seriousness, they are actually pretty fun when you do play them, and actually the reward that you do get from playing them is actually quite satisfying, considering it is a very nice suit that you can upgrade when playing more of the game. But all in all, of course, obviously with the ending as well, what that you get with Stan Lee is actually a very nice dialogue exchange between Peter Parker and Stan Lee in the comic book shop, and that's easily the best moment of the game.
What's the matter, Peter? You look like you lost your last friend. Hey, but I know for a fact you've still got at least one.
Thanks, man. You're a little less of a zitbag in my eyes.
Now, with all of the pros and the best moment out of the way, we are now going to move into the cons. Now, the first con is that this story is extremely short. The campaign that this game has is less than 6 hours, and for a free-roaming Spider-Man game, that is extremely unacceptable. At least with the Amazing Spider-Man 1, it was at least over 6 hours if you are trying to speed run through it. But this game, it is extremely short and very, very unsatisfying when you do, in fact, beat the game. I don't think it was very satisfying, and the fact that it is a short campaign obviously hinders the fact that you're playing a free-roaming Spider-Man game. Next con is that this game's story does not follow the movie at all. It just goes back and forth from trying to be a sequel to the first Amazing Spider-Man game and trying to take little bits and pieces of the movie, but still, we don't even get Electro or Green Goblin as the final boss in the game, which is just extremely odd and definitely not tailored to your standard movie tie-in game, and especially with the main story that they did in fact take with this game, you couldn't tell that this was a movie tie-in game at all. The next con is actually one that I brought up in my first Amazing Spider-Man Radioactive review, and that is that none of the movie's voice cast is in this game. That's the best part about the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man games, that almost the majority of the voice cast from the movie did in fact voice their own characters in the games, and that made it more emotional and was more meaningful when playing those games. In this, we don't get any Andrew Garfield or Emma Stone or Jamie Foxx or Dane DeHaan. We don't get anybody, and that's just really upsetting. Next up are the forgettable villains in the game. For example, Shocker. I love Shocker. Shocker's one of my favorite Spider-Man villains.
You think I'd skip town? Give New York to freaks like you? No way! I just needed an equalizer. And now? I've got it! Say hello to the seismic harness construction resource. Or, as I like to call it, the Shocker!
Whoop-de-friggin' do! Wow, you're Olympic material. Nah.
And yet they did him an extreme injustice in this game. He was extremely forgettable, and also his boss fight was extremely boring, and that also goes with Electro and Green Goblin, two of the movie villains that were in this game, and they also had kind of dull and not exciting boss fights, which is sad. And they also didn't really seem to serve a plot point in the story. They were mainly there because of the movie tie-in aspect, but as for the story, it didn't really need to be there at all. Next con, I just brought it up and I want to reiterate it again, is that almost all of the villains have extremely easy boss fights. Even on hard mode, they are still very easy. You just press a couple buttons to dodge, and then you press a couple buttons to attack your enemy. You do the same pattern over and over again, and then that's it. There's no skill, there's no strategy, there's no excitement, and it was just kind of boring, dull, and very, very plain. Probably one of the biggest cons on this list is that the city is extremely lifeless. Even when you walk directly in the street, you don't see any cars or people walking on the sidewalk or driving in the street at all, and that is just very, very sad for a quote-unquote next-gen Spider-Man game, or the first Spider-Man game to be on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and seeing a lifeless city that doesn't make you want to feel to protect it is just very upsetting. The second to last con is actually the upgrades. The upgrades barely serve a purpose. There's only one specific chain of upgrades that is helpful during the game, and that is the disarm ability. Other abilities like the Web Strike or the Seismic Blast or Ionic Webbing, they don't come in handy at all. They're very dull, and when you spend hours almost trying to gain upgrade points to buy these upgrades, they don't feel very fulfilling. They feel kind of empty and boring and not helpful at all. Now, the last con here, everybody, is that the combat is so boring. The great thing about the first Amazing Spider-Man's combat is that it was fast. Even though it was very repetitive, it was fast, and it looked very cool to do when fighting enemies, because the more that you grew your combo meter, Spider-Man would look more stylish when fighting enemies, and he would deal more damage. This Spider-Man is very slow. He repeats the same moves over and over and over again. He constantly says jokes when fighting enemies, which is fun, but then when you hear them like 20 times, it starts to get old after a while. And also the critical strikes that you can pull off in the game don't offer that much of variety. They're just kind of there to deal more damage, but that's really it. And also you spam your webs at them to do special takedowns, and then they just go on the floor and they're knocked out, and then you keep on repeating that pattern throughout the entire game, and it gets old fast. People say it is Arkham Combat. It technically is, but it is way, way worse than Arkham Combat. This is the definition of bootleg Arkham Combat for sure. Now we are at the worst moments of the list, everybody, and the first worst moment is that almost everything in the game is repetitive. Specifically, though, the side missions, where we get to fighting people in alleyways, police deadlocks, burning buildings, defusing bombs, chasing enemies in cars, and going into Russian hideouts to try and get alternate suits. All of these missions are extremely repetitive, and you actually do the exact same side mission over again if you complete a few of them in a row or something like that. It's very sad, boring, and not fun at all once you have to go throughout the city and do these missions over and over and over again. The second worst moment is that there's no Rhino in this game. Since this is a movie tie-in game, usually almost all movie tie-in games have all of the villains from the movie in the game, and in this game we only get a small little Easter egg of Rhino, which is very, very pathetic. And it's even more pathetic because the mobile game version of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, you could fight Rhino, but here you can't, and that's just really, really sad. And the last worst moment that obviously makes no surprise for anyone in the world is that forsaken, evil, disgustingly abominable hero or menace system. This is the worst idea in any Spider-Man game ever. This was the deciding factor for me if I think that Edge of Time is my least favorite Spider-Man game or this one, because what this system does is that when you fight crime, the system will boost up your hero stats. That way people will like you more and that they think you're a hero, and they will also upgrade the stats that your suit has, which is actually pretty cool. However, in order for you to keep this stat, you have to continuously do side missions in the city. However, if you just want to swing around and do nothing, even if you're standing still in the middle of the street or on a rooftop, the system meter will go all the way down to the menace level, and then you will get bombarded with bombs, lasers, force fields of electricity, and just getting killed instantly, and it is awful, especially since you are in a free-roaming city trying to do stuff for fun, and then you have this system that actually hinders the player for not doing something that the game developers mandatorily want you to do. It's a very bad design flaw, and it's just unforgivable. This is the worst feature in any Spider-Man game ever, period. And now we are here at the final part of the review, everybody, is actually my final score. Now, again, like I just said, as you may know, Edge of Time is my least favorite Spider-Man game ever. However, I do believe that this is the worst Spider-Man game of all time, and while I did give Edge of Time a solid 6 out of 10 because I do not like giving half scores, I think I'm actually going to give Amazing Spider-Man 2 a 5 out of 10. Again, if you do not like my score, that's totally fine. If you love this game, this is your favorite Spider-Man game of all time, more power to you. I did like this game when it did come out originally, but again, after replaying it and actually seeing it for what the game is, I have to give it that low score. And again, I do know that Activision kind of screwed over Beanox and that they had a lower budget and less time to make the game, but still, this is the game that was released, and what we got wasn't all that great. Still, if you just want to play a Spider-Man game because it's a Spider-Man game, I think you might have a good time with this one. And that brings an end to Radioactive Review for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, everybody. Thank you so much for watching and all your support. Again, 10,000 subscribers, that is absolutely insane. Stay tuned for this big special subscriber special video that I'm going to hopefully record and upload tomorrow. And also, the next game that I'm playing for Radioactive Replay is Spider-Man Friend or Foe, which you saw the first intro for, and here is a sneak peek of what the intro for Radioactive Review for Spider-Man Friend or Foe will be. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Peace out.
This chick wants to make out with me. This is just like one of those romance movies. So, you want to go out on a date sometime? I guess I'll just stand here and hope you'll change your mind. I'm such a player.
Judging from your bargain basement suit, I doubt we move in the same circles.
You know who I am? Are you flirting with me or what? Get out of here. So, like, you're pretty cute and stuff. Do you read manga?
Hardly. For me, silver's an acquired taste.
Whoop-de-friggin' do! Wow, you're Olympic material. Ooh, I think I got the gorilla angry!
I know he hangs out with rich, older men, and you're scaring him off, so I'll have to say goodbye. Look me up when you move out of your mom's basement.
Your dirtbag parents teach you any manners? I'll tie you to the flagpole myself, wimp. Slow down. Let me get out of your way. Excuse me, you walk often? What an unbelievably boring adventure. How can one girl be so mean? That's cool. So I guess you really like me, huh?